Hi there, Darren Garman here, and welcome to this episode of the Heartland Multifamily Show, the channel, the place for all things multifamily. And I got to say, I'm excited about this episode because I'm going to talk about interest rates and why interest rates play an important and impactful role in when and if you should consider selling a multifamily property. We're going to dig into the details here on this episode, and I think you'll be surprised to find out just how much impact interest rates have on the value of your multifamily property and really if and when you should consider selling. So stay tuned. I can't wait to go over this information on how interest rates will impact the value and the timing of the sale of your multifamily property. Welcome to the Heartland Multifamily Show, the shorter, more profitable path to multifamily ownership and investing. All right, I am looking forward to getting into the information on this episode and interest rates and their impact on when you should sell your multifamily property and the value that you're expecting to get. Now, before I get into the information, I'd ask you two favors, okay? Favor number one is if what I talk about on this episode makes sense to you, if I resonate with you, go ahead and click that subscribe button below. Would love to have you join our family here on the Multifamily Show channel. Number two, hey, I want to hear your comments. I'd love to hear your feedback and respond to you. So make sure you leave some comments below so I can get an idea what you're thinking and respond to your comments. Okay, so interest rates and when should you sell a multifamily property? I want to tell you this has a huge impact on the timing of when you should sell a multifamily property. But the one thing I want to mention before I get into the weeds on this with you a little bit is simply this. I hear from far too many investors that are concerned about rates going up, rates going down. What am I going to do? Rates are up now, rates are down. What do you think interest rates are going to do? Where are they going to be? In a past episode here at the Multifamily Show, I talked about I wanted to pass a jar around a room and have everybody put $100 in, and we all guess as to how high interest rates will actually go, and whoever gets it or gets closest, gets all the money. And people are like, oh no, I don't know, I don't really know about it, because everybody's all worried about interest rates. And as an owner who's looking to possibly sell at some time in the future, it should be a concern. And I'll tell you why. But here's the good news before I get into why you should be really concerned about this as an owner who's thinking about or considering selling at some time, maybe even in the near future. The good news, no matter what, is really the way interest rates move and fluctuate up and down really has no effect on the long-term investor. So in other episodes, even in some of my webinars, I've talked about the importance of being a long-term thinker, a long-term investor. It applies to probably most every investment, but it really applies to multifamily, okay? Because if you're a long-term investor, I'm not even worried about interest rates. I'm not even thinking about interest rates. I just find it kind of amusing, as to, all of the ruckus that my grandpa used to say, all the ruckus that this is causing, with people out there with rising interest rates. And I'm just amused. That's all, because I'm a long-term thinker. I don't care where the rates are at today. I don't care where they're at 3 years from now. I don't care where they're at 5 years from now. I'm going to continue to think and operate and focus on the long term. And if you're the same way, if you are long term, that is the solution to any interest rate problem. That's the solution to any kind of interest rate worry or concern, is being a long-term investor and a long-term thinker. Okay? And as long as you got that locked in, just sit back and be amused. That's all you really need to do, is sit back, have a little fun, laugh a little bit, and be amused at how excited everybody's getting over interest rates. Because when you're a long-term thinker, rates don't really matter, okay? Because you're moving forward, you're moving ahead, because again, you're thinking long-term, okay? Now, let's say, for the sake of this episode, you're not thinking long-term. You've got reasons why you're really considering selling a multifamily property in a high interest rate environment. What kind of effect does that have on you if you're considering doing that? Okay, so let's talk about timing versus place. Timing versus place. Okay, let's start with place. Okay, what do I mean by place? What I mean by place is there are events that happen, events that come up, life events that pretty much dictate it's time to sell, that you can't control. It's a place that you can't control. All right. So for example, I've dealt with a lot of investors over the years, a death in a family, okay, divorce, life-altering events that come up. It really, interest rates can be whatever they are. You're going to end up probably looking to sell no matter what, and it doesn't matter what the interest rates are or where they're at, because you don't have the luxury to wait around, strategize, think about it. Why? Because you're at a place in your life where you need to sell. That's what I mean by place. Okay, so with those people that are in a place where they can't really dictate if and when they decide to sell, they're going to sell, it's different. You just need to be aware that in a higher interest rate environment, you're just going to get less. You're going to get less. I'll describe why you'll get less for your property here in just a minute. Then there's timing. Remember I said there's two kind of groups. There's the place and then there's the timing. Timing is basically you have an option. You have control over when you should sell. Well, you should never sell your property in a high interest rate environment. Ever, never, never, never. You should never do that. If you have the ability to dictate if and when you should sell your property. Now, why is that? So why is it that, Darren, A, I shouldn't sell my property in a high interest rate environment if I can control the time I sell? Or B, Darren, I can't really control when I sell. Why do I still need to be at least a little bit concerned about selling my multifamily property in a high interest rate environment? It really comes down to economics, and you don't need to be a PhD in economics to know this. The problem that you run into in a high interest rate environment is with higher interest rates, obviously, debt and loan payments are what? Higher, okay, are higher. So think of it this way. If you're selling a 100-unit apartment community. All right, we're going to take a quick break. I hope you're enjoying this episode. I'm going to be having a free webinar coming up, the link's below, on how to correctly and with low risk invest your IRA or 401k in really good multifamily properties. The majority of our investors do this. I do this personally. It's not illegal. Make sure you click the link below. We'd love to have you. I get financing to buy that, and my monthly payment at 5% is $27,000 a month. Okay, $27,000 a month. All right, at 5% interest. If the interest rate goes to 10%, my payment basically doubles. Okay, now I'm paying $54,000 a month. Can I afford to pay more for your property to buy when I'm paying the lender, bank, credit union, agency financing, doesn't matter, $27,000 a month in my loan payment or $47,000 a month? You damn well know if I got to pay $47,000 a month, what's going to happen to the price of your property in my mind? Okay? It's going to come down, isn't it? It's going to come down. Why? Because I've got that debt I've got to service. I've got that loan payment I've got to make. And I have to pay less for your property because my payment is getting higher and higher and higher. Okay? That's what you're faced with in a high interest rate environment. So the good news is you're not necessarily faced with lack of demand. There's demand from investors wanting to own what you have. No doubt about it. Okay? There's demand there. So that'll be there. But the price that investors are going to be willing to pay for your property when they can get 5% financing versus 15% financing is huge. Think of it this way. I'll give you a real example. So we recently purchased a $8 million apartment community and our financing was at 5%. Okay, 5%. Think of it this way. If I waited to buy that until rates were at 10%, I'm effectively paying half of what I paid for it at 5%, aren't I? So you could sell that property to me for $8 million today when I'm getting my financing at 5%, but if financing is now at 10%, I'm paying $4 million for that property, meaning your equity, your liquidity has gone down $4 million in that example. And that's what high interest rates do. They reduce your liquidity. High interest rates reduce your liquidity and they reduce your equity. That's what happens. And so this is why I counsel partners, consulting clients, individual investors, people that I work closely with. If and when the time comes and the interest rate environment is at a place where you feel you can get a really good, acceptable to you price for your multifamily property, that's the time you should be seriously considering selling that property. Okay, if, again, you're at a point where you can choose the timing of that. But if you're at a point where you can't choose, you're at a point where a life event happens and you're faced with selling the property, just face the fact that you're not going to be able to get as much for it as you probably thought, because the interest rates will have an impact on how much a buyer like me or like you would be willing to pay for that property. Okay, so what's the moral of the story here? What is it that we need to do as multifamily owners and investors in the future? Okay, number one, know that as a seller, interest rates are super important. As a buyer, they're really not that important, because I'm going to base what I'm going to pay for your property on what my financing is going to be. My price is either going to maybe go up a little bit or down a little bit based on where that financing is. So as a buyer, it doesn't really matter. But as a seller, man, it matters a lot. A lot. So choosing when you sell when interest rates are low or as low as you think they're going to be is a big deal. Now, you don't have a crystal ball. I don't have a crystal ball. So what I'm saying here is kind of reaching a little bit. I understand that, but you want to get as close to that strategy as you can to become more liquid, to have more equity in your property, and to put more money in your pocket as you possibly can. And then number two, if you can't really choose the timing and you're looking at selling, just understand the fact that more than likely you're going to have to either do two things. Number one is you're going to have to sell at a price probably lower than what you expected, because that's really what the interest rate environment brings you in terms of offers on your property. And number two, you might have to get creative with your financing. So if interest rates are at 15%, for example, maybe you sell and you do the financing yourself at maybe 7% or 8%. Okay, that might be able to get you a higher price by you providing the financing. Now that's one of many creative ways to sell multifamily, and that's another episode for another time. But you're going to have to either be creative when you sell to get as high a price as you can during a high interest rate environment, or you're going to have to accept the fact that you're probably going to be getting a little bit less than what you originally thought. Okay, so interest rates play a big role, are a key factor in not only if you should sell, but when you should sell. Okay. So I hope this episode has been informational to you. Again, if what I've talked about with you resonates, below, go ahead and subscribe. We'd love to have you join our family here at the Heartland Multifamily Show. Or again, we'd love to hear your comments on what I've talked about during this episode. All right, take care. We'll talk to you soon. See you.